big show today. The legendary Lars Graff is joining the Florida Tennis Podcast. How lucky are we? Lars, how you doing?
I'm great. Very good. I'm actually in Europe right now because I'm getting ready to go to Roland Garros on Friday. But thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're thanking me, but I can't thank you enough. You are a legend in the tennis world. You've seen it all. You've done it all. You're continuing to do it all as the tournament director of the China Open. But just a little bit of background on you, Lars. Just cover a few things of the hats you've worn. You are you were an incredible chair umpire, tournament referee, ATP supervisor, member of the Swedish Tennis Hall of Fame. Is that correct?
That
So
is
far?
correct. Yeah.
Good. Okay. I love talking to Hall of Famers. I'm not going to lie. And you're currently the tournament director of the China Open. And you're appearing from right now.
Sweden, Båstad.
Amazing. This is my first international interview, and I'm fired up. And in fact, I'm going to start with a great quote of yours that I got from Tennis Hall of Famer, someone I love, Steve Flink, and I'm sure you love Steve too.
Yeah, great man.
Did a great article on you. We've had him on the pod, and we're going to have him again. I'm going to call that one second serve because the only one probably with a comparable knowledge of tennis is probably you. But anyway, you wrote, "For me, this has been a lifetime journey. Starting when I was a ball kid for Bjorn Borg in Sweden, my love for the sport is undisputed." So is that how you feel, and is that how it all began for you, Lars, in Sweden? Or can you give us a bit more of that origin story?
I was very lucky when I grew up. Tennis at that time was a big sport in Sweden. Of course, soccer or football was big, hockey was big, but tennis was just up there competing for all the young kids in Sweden who want to do something, after school, some exercise. There were tennis courts everywhere. When the government built a public soccer field, they made sure that beside the soccer field there were at least two tennis courts, and mainly they were clay courts because clay was the surface in Sweden. So when I grew up, tennis was a big thing, and I was lucky. My grandparents, they had a summer house in Båstad, and Båstad is a Swedish tennis mecca. That's where we played the Swedish Open, which is the week after Wimbledon, ATP 250. But at that time, Sweden was extremely successful in Davis Cup, and I was so lucky because for the 10, 20 years, I would say Sweden probably had an average of 1 to 2 Davis Cup matches at home every year on clay in Båstad. And you started as a ball kid in the Swedish Open, and then you became a ball kid in the Davis Cup. So I had an opportunity. I mean, I remember my first big Davis Cup match was, I think it was in Sweden, 1973 or 72. Sweden played Italy. And Italy came with, Adriano Panatta, Antonio
Sure.
Sogarelli, Corrado Barasutti, and Paolo Bertolucci. I still remember those four names. They came
Wow.
to Sweden and they played against Sweden. And, Sweden at that time was Björn Borg, was Ove Bengtsson, Kjell Johansson, and then Tenny Svensson, those Swedish guys. And it was unbelievable. Italians came to Båstad and they brought the container with all their things. And what I mostly remember, they brought the container with food because they had to bring their own chef. The Italians could not eat pasta the way they got it served in Sweden in a restaurant. So they brought their own chef who made the pasta for the players, and that was like a big thing here. And then every summer it was a Swedish Open, and then there was Davis Cup matches. I remember a very famous Davis Cup match where I also was a line umpire. It was 1984 when Sweden won Davis Cup for the second year. In the summer or in the fall, we played Czechoslovakia, and Ivan Lendl was playing.
Wow.
And Ivan Lendl played Henrik Sundström, and Ivan Lendl was up 2-0 against Henrik Sundström and lost. And
Wow.
that match was played in the fall in September, and it was a big, people came from everywhere towards Sweden, Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia was a huge powerhouse, in tennis then, and has
Sure.
always been, was produced players all the time. So that was one of the most famous matches I remember. But I also remember one very famous match, 1975. Sweden played Chile,
Okay.
and Chile was at that time, as you know, under the dictatorship of Pinochet. Salvador Allende was the elected president of Chile, but he was overtaken by Pinochet. And Sweden at that time was very, very strong against any kind of dictatorship, and it still is today.
Sure.
And Sweden played Chile, and the only people on the stands could be people from tennis clubs,
Sure.
and
Okay.
that. So they didn't want anything to happen. So every person, you had to go through security, very, 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 very tough security. I had to go through a house where I checked you completely, like on an airport. Then you
Wow.
came to the court. And on the court, they put big nets on both sides of the center court. They put nets that was high, like 20 meters high. And close to the court, it was only police officers sitting. And then the people could sit. And Sweden played Chile. And of course, Borg did his famous debut in Sweden, 15 years old at that time. And he beat Oni Parun, who was a very big player on the world, top 10 player, and he beat him in
Wow.
that game. And that year, 1975, Sweden, of course, won the Davis Cup the first time and played the Czech Republic in the final in Stockholm with John Cordes. And so tennis, when I grew up, I was very lucky. Tennis was a major sport in Sweden, and Sweden was, of course, doing very well.
Yeah, I mean Sweden, the names of those players, I mean, it was an extraordinary era. I still remember a cover of a tennis magazine where they had some of the top players looking like the Beatles from Meet the Beatles. That it was like one of those classic covers. And as someone who collects a lot of tennis memorabilia, I remember some of the magazine covers, but some of those players were just extraordinary, and they came up against extraordinary players. I mean, I'm wondering, I think you may have called lines maybe against the American team with McEnroe and Connors, and I can't even imagine they weren't getting along at all, as I understand it from what I've read historically. But what was it like calling it against like the great players you had against those American players and some of those in
I
personalities?
mean, the most famous match I ever called was 1984. I was a line umpire. I was a service line umpire. Sweden, United States in
Okay.
Gothenburg, Davis Cup final. United States play with Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe, Peter Fleming, and Bob Lutz.
Wow.
So it was a tremendous team from the Americans, and Fleming and McEnroe, they had won 17 Davis Cup doubles in a row, and McEnroe was top player on any surface. In Connors, he was always a top player. I mean, he was a little older, but he was still doing very well. And Arthur Ashe was the captain for the U.S.
Wow.
team, and I remember when they were practicing, Connors didn't even look at Arthur Ashe. He was practicing, and he didn't want to practice with McEnroe. He was practicing with Fleming and Bob Lutz, and I think the Americans had one more, maybe Tom Gorman or somebody was there. And the first game was Henrik Sundström against John McEnroe.
Right.
And Sundström was a good clay court player, but McEnroe was number one or number two in the world. And Sundström wins,
Wow.
and that put everything on. And then Mats Wilander beat Connors. That was 2-0 Sweden. And then the Swedish doubles team of Stefan Edberg and Anders Järryd, they played the doubles, and Sweden won the doubles. So Sweden played with four different players, and Edberg was very high ranked at that time. He didn't even play singles. They put Sundström in singles. So at that time, Sweden had 4 or 5 guys in the top 10, and even
Yeah.
Anders Järryd was in the top 10. He did very well especially on the hard court. So I was very fortunate, on calling, and of course, it was a
Right.
lot of pressure to calling with McEnroe
Phew.
and Connors. You call a
Wow.
serve fault. It was close. They stare at you, and
The stare down.
at that time, you had to go up and show the ball mark, and then you have to go up. At that time, the chair umpire never got involved in the ball marks. They called the line umpire up. A
Okay.
line umpire went up, checked the ball mark, and did a signal. Yes, it was out or it was good. Then it changed 5 to 10 years later that the chair umpires they went down to check the mark themselves. But at that time, the line umpires were checking the marks. And I remember, there was a lot of pressures. 15,000 people in the stadium, and McEnroe was standing at the net staring at you. You had to go up. And of course, you had to find the right mark. And a lot of pressure, but I think that was how it started. I love the pressure, You
Yeah,
know.
I'm breaking a sweat now, just kind of thinking about that. But that's an example though of a team divided, taking nothing away from Sweden. But I believe that at or around that time, or at some point, Arthur Ashe and Jimmy Connors were involved in a lawsuit
Hmm.
about professional tennis. Jimmy Connors and McEnroe couldn't stand each other at the time, and I'm not sure they're better friends now. When you play a team sport, you got to have some of that chemistry, and it wasn't there. And speaking of that, just as an aside, I always say the Aussies are some of the nicest people I've ever bumped into, tennis players. I became somewhat friendly with Fred Stolle, but I will tell you, I got to know Mats Wilander a little bit and just couldn't believe how nice he is. I did this thing for Florida Tennis called v, Wilander on Wheels, which is kind of where he does
Hmm.
a tennis thing, and I just was stunned by how nice and gracious and humble he was. And that leads me to got to tell a nice story about you, Lars, if you don't mind. And you're thinking this podcast is going to last forever, but I meet you at Racket X a couple of years ago, Miami Beach Convention Center, and it's a great event. It takes place right around the same time as the Miami Open, and it's got all the racket sports under one roof. Robin Duda does an amazing thing, and Greg Sharko, the legend, says, "I want you to meet Lars Graff," and my head's kind of spinning like, the Lars Graff, like I'm going to meet Lars Graff, like this is not happening. Sure enough, Lars Graff is in front of me, and I'm trying to speak and act like, not a big deal, but I've watched you call countless matches, Wimbledon finals. So we're having a nice conversation. Then ultimately, Sharko says, everybody calls him Sharko. Sharko says, at some point later in the day, "Do you mind driving Lars Graff over to his hotel and then to the Miami Open?" I'm like, "Mind?" I'm thinking this is like the greatest thing that could happen to me. And the funny thing, and you were so gracious, is we go out. I don't know if you remember this. We go to find my car, and I can't find my car. It's one of these monstrous Miami Beach, Miami, parking lots, and it's got to be 90 degrees if it's, and we're walking, and I'm thinking, I cannot believe I've got Lars Graff schlepping through this parking lot. And I kept saying, "Lars, why don't you go sit? I'll go get the car." You're like, "I love the heat. I love walking. I'm having a great time." And I'm like, "This is the greatest guy." I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Do you remember this? It was
I
unbelievable.
remember it now when you tell me. Yeah, I remember. We were looking for the car in the
Yeah,
parking garage. You're walking around there. Yeah,
yeah. And then
no
you
problem. I'm
you
used to the. I'm used to the heat. I prefer the heat in Miami than the cold in Stockholm. My body has completely adapted to the Florida weather.
great. You've become a Floridian. I was out there on the court this morning, and it is steamy, and I love it. So that was my first introduction to Lars Graff. You told some great stories, which we'll get into today. But I know you're humble. But for the benefit of our listeners, again, I want to step back a little bit in your history, and a lot of this, again, credit to Steve Flink. You were a junior tennis player in Sweden, and if I understood correctly, if you lost a match, and unfortunately you may have lost your share of matches, and you had to be a chair umpire, call for other junior matches, right? Is that accurate?
That was the rule in Sweden at that time. You enter a junior tournament, you win the game, you prepare for the next one. You lose the match, you have to umpire the next match. And of course, they paid you at that time. You got maybe $1 per set. So if
Wow.
you if you if you got a free set match, you got $3 in your hand, and now you can buy an ice cream after the match.
I
So,
I love that. I just love that. And I'm trying to picture how that would work in America with like John McEnroe, you know?
but
Uh,
but
th-
that happened to everybody. You can ask Mats Wilander. He was
okay. All
umpiring.
right.
Stefan Edberg was umpiring. Borg won all the time when he was a junior,
I
so
was
he
going to
probably
say,
didn't
how many
umpire a
times did
lot, but
he
he,
jump in the
he
chair?
had to do matches. But
Yeah.
all, Jonas Björkman or all those Swedish guys that Robin Söderling, whoever it is, all those guys knew that that was the rule, and they have umpired matches. And that's probably why, if you see in the history, the Swedish players, they were often very respectful to the umpires because they came from a background that you lost the match, you have the umpire. And so they in Sweden, it's not like in America where you learn to question authority. In Sweden, it's more like if this guy is an umpire, we have to respect him.
I love that, and I have spent a little bit of time with Jonas Bjorkman, and coincidentally, I live in Parkland, and the Parkland Tennis Center. Robin Soderling is friends with the tennis pro there, Rob Nichols, and so when they opened the Parkland Tennis Center, I wasn't living in Parkland at the time, but I covered it for Florida Tennis, and Robin Soderling was out there, and another super guy. He was
Yeah.
plugging his company with the tennis balls, and I was like, it's hard to imagine. I mean, he directly or indirectly is responsible for Roger, however you want to talk about winning the French. I mean, that
Yeah,
that
exactly.
that trajectory.
Beat Rafa there. He
Yeah,
beat
he beat.
Rafa in the French,
Yeah,
so of
that's how I
course he
should have
beat
put it. He beat Rafa in the French. Um, and a gracious, just a nice, put up with my questions like you're doing right now, and just a super guy. Must be a Sweden thing, a Swedish thing. But
But he played different to the other Swedish guy, Robin. He was
yeah,
hitting the ball much flatter and huge serve, and he had a very special game, very powerful game from the baseline. Amazing
yeah,
power.
yeah. I mean, I'm here to have you tell stories, but I got one Robin Soderling story. I there used to be a tournament called the BMW tournament out in Sunrise, Florida,
Yeah.
and Magnus Norman. I used to volunteer there because I take my tennis lessons as a over at Sunrise. I've been taking them forever. Like, as I said, my coach, I'm not getting better, thankfully, for him. So Soderling is playing. That's before people really knew who he was.
Yeah.
And Magnus Norman's out there. And during one of the matches, Magnus Norman literally stormed out because Soderling had, I don't know, thrown his racket or something. Well, anyway, Soderling ends up winning it, holding that giant cardboard check, which I always wondered how you deposited those, but that's for another show. And he couldn't have been nicer too. But it was interesting watching Soderling rise, and
Mm.
you never know when someone's going to click and hit it. But watching him interact with Magnus Norman was fun. Um,
Yeah, I remember that tournament very well because that was the second week of Indian Wells. So players that lost in Indian Wells, they had to enter this tournament before Indian Wells. If they were still in the draw in Indian Wells, they were taken out. But then the tournament always had some late wild cards because there were some top players
right.
who lost. And I think Robin lost that year. I think Thomas Berdych lost. So they got the chance to play in Sunrise, and it was very good. I mean, it's a very very high level. Now they have that tournament in Phoenix, in Arizona,
Okay.
and it's probably the best challenger looking at the player field. The cutoff is like ATP 250.
Sure. I should give a shout out to Gabe Nerona. He's a friend, and he ran that Sunrise tournament. He also had the Davis Cup at Sunrise Tennis Center
Yeah.
between Israel and Argentina.
Mm.
Yeah. So to take lessons, it's just a weird thing to take lessons at a club and play at a club, and then have Mark Philippoussis walk by and Gail Monfils and Robin Soderling. And I think I ended up the poor guy. I think I drove Tomas Berdych also once and his family. And that time I found the car, so that was good.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's interesting when that happens at a local club. But getting back to you, so you become a sectional umpire, right?
Yeah.
Um, you regional umpire, then a national umpire, and then an international umpire. I want to say in 1987 under the official banner of
Yeah.
the Men's International Professional Tennis Council. Gold badge in 1990. Then an ATP Tour official. But I have these statistics, and I need you to confirm these, Lars, if this is accurate.
Everything is accurate, you say. In 1974, when I became a sectional umpire, it was also called a club umpire.
Okay.
That was the first level. You learn the basic tennis rules. And at that time, there was no computer, so you had a scorecard. You had to fill in the scorecard. And then after that, if you want to umpire in tournaments on a district level, you have to take the next, which was called regional umpire or district umpire. And then if you want to go on the highest level in the country, then you became a national umpire. And I took all those steps in Sweden. But then in Sweden, we had a rule saying that you could not be an international umpire until you were 25 years old.
Wow.
So I had to wait until I was 25-year-old to do all the matches on the highest level in Sweden. So I could not even do matches. It was very, very tough to give you any matches in qualifying in the Stockholm Open or the Borstad because you need to reach a certain age. And then after I reached that age, I got, of course, a chance to go to the International Umpire School. And at that time, it was called MIPTC, Men's International Professional Tennis Council. And it was in Paris. And I was there, and it was Ken Farrar, who was the teacher. Ken Farrar, he became a very famous supervisor for the ITF. He worked for ATP, and then when the ITF started breaking out, he was working for them, and then David Cooper. So I went to that school in Paris, and luckily I passed the school because this was an international school with
Sure.
all the rule questions in English and
Wow.
cases and decisions and all that. And so I was very fortunate to go to that school, and I still have people that I remember who went to the same school, and people came from all over the world. I was the
Ama-
only one from Sweden. There was one American guy. There was an English guy. There was, of course, French, Bruno Rebeu, if you remember him, very
Okay.
famous French umpire. He went to the same school as me in Paris there. So I was very fortunate to go to that school, and the school was at Roland Garros, and the school was at court number one at Roland Garros. They have some office space there, so I still remember it with very, very joyful memories.
Lars, that is unbelievable. And your numbers that I wanted to go through, you would call six title round contests at the ATP finals, 64 Masters 1000 finals, over 300 combined finals at Grand Slam tournaments, the Olympic Games, ATP Tour events, and WTA events. You worked 5 Olympic Games, officiated as an umpire at more than 600 tournaments, and this is the number that you got to confirm also. Those are crazy numbers, but you sat in the chair for an astounding 7,000 matches. Is that accurate? Could
Yeah,
that
that is
possibly be
accurate.
accurate?
That is accurate.
Wow.
And and that, of course, I was very fortunate to be part of, like you say, the Olympic Games. And my first Olympic Games was 1992 in Barcelona. And it was the tennis was very fun. And the two incidents from there. One was that every day you get assigned to do matches.
Okay.
And one day I had a match saying Steffi Graf. So I said, okay, I'm going to Steffi Graf. And the WTA supervisor at that time, Georgina Clark, unfortunately it's not around us anymore, she saw that Lars Graff, Steffi Graf. No, no, that doesn't work. So she took me off that match and put me on Arantxa Sanchez instead. So they changed the assignment on the day because she probably hadn't seen that the night before or didn't pay attention to it. So I didn't do Steffi Graf there. I had to wait to do Steffi Graf until she made mixed doubles with John McEnroe in Wimbledon. Then I got Steffi Graf finally. But I also was very lucky in the Olympic Games because that was my first Olympic Games, and they gave me the semi-final in doubles, and that was a nice match. It was Boris Becker and
Wow.
Michael Stich playing against Javier Frana and Christian Minucci from Argentina.
Wow.
So I did that semifinal, and then of course Becker and Stich won the doubles, and that was a good experience. And of course, I was so lucky at that Olympic Games because they also gave us some tickets, so I had a chance to see the Dream Team playing basketball.
Wow. What do you
Yeah,
remember
wow.
about that? I know we're going a little off script here, Lars, and non-tennis, but what do you remember? Because I've watched recently a documentary on the Dream Team, and that was an impossible ticket, and it was
Mm.
just beyond. It was like the Beatles on steroids. What was that like watching the Dream Team?
That was amazing. When I grew up, Larry Bird was like a legend in basketball, and suddenly I'm sitting there and seeing Larry Bird playing, and Michael Jordan was in there in the team, and it was just a tremendous to see it. And I also got a chance to see some other. I went to see track and field. I remember that, and also table tennis was also a big sport in Sweden when I grew up, and I got to see the Swedish famous Geo Wallner who won the Olympic gold medal. So the Olympic Games was a very, very positive experience, and I was lucky. I went to Sydney Olympics 2000, and then of course I went to 2004 to go to the Athens game.
Wow.
2008, I was in Beijing. And then my last Olympics was 2012 in London. So I was in the 5 Olympic Games, and that was it's a big honor to go to the Olympics. And
Wow. Incredible stuff, Lars. And before we go any further, you left the world of being a chair umpire. Was the last match ATP match? Was it the Miami Open, and then it was the finals with Djokovic? Do you remember by any chance?
The last match on ATP was the finals in London, '02.
Okay, that's
Novak
the last.
Djokovic, Roger Federer, 1 and 2 in the world, 7-6, 7-5 for Djokovic. That
Yeah,
was my last match. I never umpired a match after that. And that was
that
a
what a way to.
fantastic way to finish.
And I know, which is highly unusual. I know after that match there were kind words from both players about you, which
Yeah.
is really
Especially nice from Federer, who lost the match,
yeah.
who mentioned me and remembered me immediately in his speech. It was very nice. And that was a good year. That was the year also I got to do the Wimbledon ladies final. Serena Williams against
Wow.
Agnieszka Radwanska. And that was quite funny also because at that time I was in Wimbledon. I didn't do any ladies matches. And then on Wednesday, they give you like a letter saying that you have appointed. And I got a letter saying I've been appointed to do the ladies singles final in Wimbledon on Saturday. And that was on Wednesday. Then WTA on Thursday found out that Wimbledon had selected me because it was Wimbledon who selected.
Wow.
And they said, no, 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 he cannot do the ladies final. He has not done any ladies matches.
Wow.
WTA say. I didn't do any ladies matches during whole Wimbledon. And then Wimbledon said, no, no, don't worry, we're going to fix that. So on Friday, they gave me a ladies double semifinal, and I still remember it was Panetta and what's the name of the other
So you had
girl?
Flavia Panetta.
Flavia Panetta played, and then there was who did she play with? Another Italian girl who won Roland Garros.
Not was it not Vinci or Roberta?
No, no,
I'm
no,
just
no.
trying to think about the names
Okay,
of.
anyhow, so I'm
Go ahead.
standing there at the coin toss on court one in Wimbledon, waiting for the girls, and they come out and they say, "Lars, what happened? What have you done wrong?"
That's
So
that's
they were
unbelievable.
surprised to see me. So then I got a ladies match on Friday, and then on Saturday I did a ladies final with Serena and Radwanska. It was quite fun though that I didn't have to do any ladies matches, and then they had to give me ladies doubles.
I can't imagine anybody saying anything to the All England clubs that they're not going to be able to get around. They're going to do what they're going to do. The All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet
Yeah, no,
Club. So,
that is
but
of course, tennis has always been fragmented.
right,
The,
sure.
you know, the
We
the the
call it the
Grand
alphabet
Slams.
soup.
Exactly. The Grand Slams are doing whatever they want. ATP is doing what they want. WTA is doing what they want. Even if today we are much closer, still, they have their own. They can have their own rules and own, decisions, And I think we saw now this year what happened, which I think is a very positive thing. But US Open put mixed doubles 2 days before they make the main draw, and they do it on whenever it is Tuesday, Wednesday, I think. And I think it would be tremendously successful. With you will see top players playing mixed doubles this year at US Open.
Sure, sure.
But the thing is that the Grand Slams they can do whatever they want. On ATP or WTA, you cannot change things like that. In Beijing we have a 32 draw men and we have a double draw of 16, and we have to keep that. We cannot just change from one year to another. So the Grand Slams still are very, very strong in tennis and can make their own decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite an honor to call a women's final at Wimbledon, and you'd call, at the men's final. Has anybody else done that?
I don't
Called?
know. 2009, I got the men's final. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Andy Roddick. No, sorry, Roger Federer and Andy Roddick. I have
Yeah,
to say
sure.
Federer first because he won
Yeah.
16-14 in the fifth. Roddick lost his serve once in the whole
It's
match. So
it's a match that Roddick, if you listen to his podcast, served. I think
yeah,
every great player thinks about their losses more than their wins, is what I've
yeah.
kind of garnered from hearing these greats talk. That match sticks with them. Now, my podcast, I like to show some memorabilia because I have a big tennis collection. So I have something I think you might be interested in seeing. All
Okay.
right. Now this is a ticket from that match. This is an
Oh, it's a ticket
encapsulated.
from that match.
This is
Oh,
a ticket.
lovely.
This is a
That's
ticket
very nice.
from that match,
Yeah,
encapsulated the 2009 Wimbledon July 5th men's singles final, Federer versus Roddick. And
beautiful.
somebody would have had the privilege of watching this match and listening to Lars Graff call that match, which must have been an extraordinary experience, and I'll show you just a couple more things on this. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just as long as we're getting this is a Roger Federer signed
Card.
card, and
Beautiful.
these are kind of cool. This is Andy Roddick's iconic Babolat
Shoe. I remember it very well. Yeah.
red, white, and blue shoe
Beautiful.
that he
Yeah.
loves. So I had to share that with you. And you mentioned McEnroe before, so I'll just show little signed
Picture of macaron.
Johnny Mac card. And Serena Williams you mentioned because she played Radwanska in that
Yeah.
other final. And that's a just an encapsulated card. It's a mint 10 card. And I will before I ask you about the Roddick Federer match because I want to go through that a little bit. I
I have to
want you
show you one thing. Well,
please.
I need to show you one thing. I think
I love when you share.
okay, I show you here.
What are we looking at here?
This is the letter I got from England, from the All England Club. It said, "Dear Lars, the Championship 2012. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as the chair umpire for the ladies singles final. Umpiring a Grand Slam final is a great honor, and we would like to congratulate you on this prestigious appointment. Best wishes for a successful match. Kind regards." And then it's the Andrew Jarrett, who was the referee in Wimbledon at that time, former player from
Lars,
Great Britain.
can you hold it up just a little bit? Wow, thank you so much for sharing that with our viewers with the Wimbledon. It's
I had to save that, you know.
no, that's great. And I would imagine, Lars, that you have saved some other things
Yeah, I have
from
another
your
thing here to show you also before
sure,
we
sure,
continue.
sure.
Here is my first Olympic Games in
Oh my
Barcelona.
goodness. Lars Eric Magnus Graff. Look at that. Can you back it up just a little bit? The other
Closer to
way. Yeah, closer to you.
yeah.
Look at that. And that is, can you pick it up just a little? That is pretty special stuff. Thank you for sharing that.
I
Wow.
was just sitting when you shared something. I was sitting here in the office. I had to
That's
show something else
no,
to you.
it's always great. And I gotta take you through, if you don't mind, just a few matches because
Yeah, for sure.
um let's start. I'm actually going to go to the Cincinnati Open this year, and there's an unbelievably famous Cincinnati Open final. It's Rafter, it's Sampras, it's a quintessential Lars Graff moment. Can you take everyone through that, please?
That was the summer when Rafter was the best hardcore player in the world, probably, and he won the week before in Canada, and now he plays Pete in the final in Cincinnati. It was a close match, as always. Those two guys, you know, holding serves back and forth, getting into the end of the match, and Rafter has a break, serving for the match, and it's on my near sideline. It's 40-30 for Rafter. He serves, and he hit the ball flat on the line, boom, and the line umpire called the ball out or fault, and I said, correction, the ball is good. Game, set, the match, Rafter. So I had to overrule on a match point, and that was before Hawkeye or anything electronic devices or help. So of course, you know, Rafter comes up and shake my hand, and Pete is shocked. What happened here? I mean, why did he overrule on this point? The line umpire called it out, and then you know the crowd was a little in uproar. Of course, an American player losing, and an overrule on the chair umpire, and then I had to get down from the chair, get out of the stadium, and then I had to wait in the office for a while because people were worried about the crowd. And then I remember Paul Anacone came in, you know, and said something, you know, very polite to me, Lars, whatever. And then I was going to Indianapolis the next in the evening, and we were driving to Indianapolis. So
Sure.
we waited for the work, finish matches, prize ceremonies, everything, and then we drove to Cincinnati, to Indianapolis. When we came to Indianapolis, I go into the hotel, we park the car, I go in. Two guys are waiting for me, Todd Martin and Alex Correia. And
Wow.
Todd Martin said, Lars, if everybody did what you did, this would be an easy life for us players. And then Correia said, Lars, great job. And of course, it was a lot of pressure. You know, made an overrule, and then of course Rafter become number one again. And you know, then I think he went in to win the U.S. Open. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, but you know, you make an overrule like that, and you don't even think. It's instinct. It's just a decision. It's just a reaction. You see the ball on the line, the ball is called out. You say correction, ball is good. You don't even think about it. So it was a tough call, and of course, I remember, some people were, writing about it in the newspaper. Of course, some American journalists were more unhappy than the journalists from Spain or from
Sure.
Germany or from Australia. And then I asked Rafter on the press conference, "What do you think about the overrule, Pat?" And
Let
you
me
know what
guess
his
what he
answer
said.
was?
Let me guess what he said. Great call, Lars.
He said it was a beauty.
It was a beauty. Yeah.
That was Pat Rafter. It was a beauty.
Yeah.
And then, after that, I remember I came back to Cincinnati every year. I was there working. And then a couple of years later, the Cincinnati Enquirer made a survey or asking people which is the most memorable moments in the Cincinnati Open history. And this was number one. It
Has
was
to
number
be.
one. Rafter, Sampras, overruled by chair umpire. It ended up as number one. I still have that newspaper. It was quite fun.
I love that you have that newspaper, but you answered my question because I was going to say, did you have a cognitive momentary thought about, or was it just instinct? You saw the ball and you made
It
the
was
call.
instinct. It was
Okay.
instinct. I didn't even think about it. I
Okay.
didn't even think it was match point or anything. I just made a call.
Right.
40-30, he's serving. Ball is called out. Correction, ball is good. That's how umpiring should be. You should not think about who's playing, what is the consequences, what is the crowd going to say, where are you, which country. You cannot think about that. You
Right.
have to make the decisions.
Well, you kind of went into an area, and I'll get back to the matches for a minute that I wanted to ask you about anyway, which is being a chair umpire today with all the technology. I'm wondering if you think that chair umpires would be a little more reticent or reluctant to make that call today with all this technology out there.
Definitely. Definitely.
Okay.
I think chair umpiring has changed a lot since
Okay.
electronics came in. Unfortunately, the chair umpires now are not used to make decisions. So if you are working on the highest level on the WTA Tour, ATP Tour, on the Grand Slams, you have electronic line calling in every match. You don't need to make the call. You can wait for the machine to make the call. And so I think it's a more difficult decision for a chair umpire now. And I think, all chair umpires that work on the highest level, they should work a couple of challengers now each
Okay.
year to just because it's not only about if the ball is in or out. If the ball is in or out, okay, we have the technology. The problem is the decision making. If you don't make decisions, then suddenly there is a knot up, or there is a touch,
Sure.
or there is something else happening in the match where you have to make a quick decision. But as you're not used to make decisions all the time, when I started, we made decisions every game. Every game you have to make a decision, let, fall, whatever. That now, when you come to a situation where there is a doubles match and it's a close rally and suddenly the ball touches one of the players, we have seen situations from that last couple of years where umpires don't make a decision. Maybe they saw what happened, but they were not used to make that instinct decision. And you cannot wait. The problem is that you don't make the decision immediately. Now a player says something. Now it's an appeal. So now you cannot make the decision. You can say, "Oh, sorry, I know it was a let, or it was a touch, or it was a not up." It's too late. And we've seen some very tough situations lately with that, where situations where umpires should have made decisions. So umpiring is very tough now because they're not used to make the decisions. And I mean, come on, code violations. This is another thing. Now we have less code violations
Sure.
because there is less frustration about bad lines calling or whatever. So now there's less code violations also, and
Sure.
and there is less decision also. To I mean, it doesn't have to be code violation. It can also be like you tell a player, please keep the racket in your hand, or be careful with the balls when you hit the balls back at the end of the court because there are
Sure.
ball kids, there are line umpires. Now it's more seldom. So when something happens now, it almost becomes a bigger thing.
Sure. It's magnified.
People talk more about it now. Oh God, he hit the ball out in the stands. An umpire didn't do anything. What? Umpire, no, hit the ball out in the stands. I mean, so I think, it's umpiring has changed a lot the last couple of years.
And well, I did want to show you covered, you chaired the Roddick Federer and then Radwanska Serena, Serena, but you probably attended a champions dinner or two. This is a champions dinner invitation signed by Pete Sampras from 1993.
Oh,
I don't
great.
have I don't have too many people on here that attended a champions dinner. Can you, Lars, take us through this?
Oh my
How does
great.
this work? What do you order, or does it just show up, or you wear a tux? What's going on with this?
So what happened was that I arrived early in the morning before the final, 2009, and they told me that you have to do the fitting for the tuxedo. So you come early in the morning and you go to the men's locker room, and there is a guy from a company who is renting the tuxedos to Wimbledon, because it's not only the chair umpire who is lacking to travel with the tuxedo, also the players. You don't know who's going to be in the Wimbledon final. And there are some other people too. So you do all the fitting there, and they make sure that you have the right size in the tuxedo. And then, of course, you prepare for your match and you talk to the line umpires and the referee. Then you have to go out on court. And as I told you, people tell me, oh, the match was 4.5 hours. How did you survive without going to the bathroom? I say, it's much more than 4.5 hours, because I have to be in court half an hour before to make sure everything is there. And then when the match is finished, you have a prize ceremony. So it's another half an hour. So it's maybe 5.5 hours. And then after the match is finished, you have to go back. At that time, we had a scorecard. You have to write the scorecard in, make sure that it's correct. You didn't forget any points. You have to sign it. Then you give the scorecard in, and then what they do in Wimbledon, then they get the scorecard. The players, they call it players to come to the office, and they have to sign the scorecard. And
Wow.
then they give the scorecard to a chair umpire. So both players signed the scorecard, both Roddick and Federer signed the scorecard, and then they gave it to me. I got the scorecard like a gift or whatever. And then after that, then you have to go up in the locker room, and now you have to change to the tuxedo. And then, it was a long match. So basically, when I would change the tuxedo, they put me in a car together with some people, and then we go to the champions dinner. And at the champions dinner, you come there, they take pictures, you have to walk up, and they have the trophies and everything. And then you sit down at the dinner. And 2009, no one asked me if I was a vegetarian or anything. I'm sure if I would told them, I could have got vegetarian food. But it's a seated dinner. It's a 3, 4 course dinner. You sit down and and then there is some speeches. The chairman of the All England Club has a speech, and then they bring up. I think they bring up the players. They bring
Sure.
up the players to speak, both of them there, and so it was good. It was a good experience. Very, very traditional dinner. You feel like like you are in a place that you normally not belong to, with all these people, beautiful. I mean, of course, there were a lot of former players when I was there also.
Sure.
They always invite, the former players, former winners, member of the All England Club. So it was very nice. Great experience.
I can't thank you enough for the whole behind the scenes. And I'm trying to picture, like, do Federer and Roddick uh, travel with a tuxedo, or are they being fitted? Because they'd be
Maybe
super.
fitted too.
So wouldn't
I
they be
think.
wouldn't they be superstitious? Like, what are you fitting me for a tuxedo for? I haven't won the match. So they are fitted. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, it goes. I don't think
Wow,
any
that's
of those guys travel in tuxedo. They have enough. They have enough in their luggage to travel to all the tournaments. So they get fitted. There were a lot of tuxedos there. A lot of former players came up and got a tuxedo, and a lot of members of the All England Club and the referee team. Andrew Jarrett and a lot of people. They got a
that's
tuxedo.
amazing. So as a memorabilia guy, I'm listening to
Exactly.
you tell this story, and I'm thinking, where's that scorecard, Lars? Tell me you've got that scorecard in some special place.
I have it in Florida in a
Don't reveal
frame.
anything else, but you have it in Florida in a
I have it
frame. All right.
in a frame
Don't say where it
together with
is.
this together with a picture of the two
All right.
players, of course, and then of course I have the same with the scorecard from the ladies' final, and I also did the doubles final with that was in 2007. it was what was it? Uh, Clement and Lodra beat Brian in 2007.
Wow.
It was a doubles final I did. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of tradition. And then after the final, you have to go up and you get a medal from the Duchess of Kent. A medal say that you have done the Wimbledon final, singles final. Your name is on it, and it says ladies or ladies singles final, men's singles final, men's doubles final. So I have a lot of memorabilia also.
So, Lars, down the road, I'm gonna have to visit, and you can have security, but I'm gonna have to visit and look at this stuff because honestly, that is, you talk about a historical. It is amazing to me that you got the scorecards, you got to sign them. Now, I do have one other piece of memorabilia that I don't have to here to show, but I actually have a a Wimbledon chair umpire's a male umpire's uniform
Uniform, oh great.
that he donated to a charity event. So I was
Who was
it's
this? Who,
it's
who
in storage.
donated it? You
I
say
want to say is it Ali
Nili.
Ali
Ali
Neely?
Nili.
I
Yeah,
hope he
yeah.
doesn't kill me for this, but he donated this to a
Oh,
charity event that I bought it
that's
at,
very nice of him.
and
That's very generous of him
it
to
was,
donate.
and I thought it's in storage. Otherwise, I would have kind of worn it and just threw you off completely when I
Oh,
sat
you bought
down.
it, you mean?
Oh, I own it. Yeah, yeah. Oh,
You
yeah, I
bought
got
it
it.
at the charity auction. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So I thought, when I'm interviewing you, I would actually wear it, but it's in storage. I didn't have time to get it, but I thought we'll tune in and I'll be sitting here like, starting the interview wearing it. But anyway,
Yeah,
but that's I love the memorabilia stuff, and I love that you got those
yeah.
scorecards. Those are great piece of history. And so we have talked a little bit about um the Wimbledon finals, Radwanska, Serena, and Roddick and Federer. But you had been quoted as saying that back in the day, uh, the umpiring wasn't as professional. It was kind of it was a developing process. They had, I think, volunteers who were like Wimbledon, for example. I think you talked about how you had someone prominent in the community, a doctor, a lawyer, a military person, and I have one other piece of memorabilia that no one else would possibly appreciate, but I thought I got to break this out for you. It's a letter,
Okay,
way before your time. It's June 9th, 1930. All right,
okay.
it's June 9th, 1930, and I want to read this. I want to read this to you.
Yeah.
Um, let me grab this. Give me 1 second. Um, and it says essentially it's written by Arthur F. Piccole, Vice Chairman of the Tennis Umpires Committee of the United States Lawn Tennis Association, dated June 9th, 1930. No one else would ever show this to you but Lars Graff.
Okay.
And he says, Dear Mr. Gouvet, herewith enclosed, please find a list of my men who have been doing the bulk of umpiring, lining, foot faulting, etc., in the major tennis tournaments hereabouts during the last few years. And by the way, this is out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Mm.
This is a preferred list of men whom I know have actually contributed their services in these tournaments. The numerals upon the extreme right hand margins are merely my suggestions as to the number of passes, which I think is sufficient to induce them to appear. My thought is to allow them as enumerated season passes. I do not expect them all to appear. Moreover, I think comparatively few will attend the dinner. As I am shy of office machinery here, I suggest you have Mr. Fall send out these tickets with any duplicated notations you think advisable. With kind regards, I am faithfully yours. Uh, P.S. Thank Bill Breck for his kind letter. I bring this up because it appears to me that in 1930 they were inducing people to call lines by giving them match passes. So that's
Yeah.
kind of consistent with your thought process about how it all evolved, right?
No, I think if you go back to umpiring at that time, when I started, as I told you, I came to Wimbledon. All the chair umpires in Wimbledon, they were either high military ranks, they were colonels, they were generals, they were from the Navy, they were doctors, they were dentists, and they were lawyers. All of them were there. And in Sweden, I remember when I started, the umpires in Sweden was exactly the same. A lot of lawyers, a lot of doctors. I spoke to one guy today. He was umpire when I started. He was a dentist. So umpiring at that time, he was the highest person in society who was a member of the club, who was the umpire. And if you compare today, where we have a
Sure.
25-year-old kids who can be umpiring, and maybe they come from anywhere. So today, you look at the skills. At that time, you look at the position in society to be an umpire. And I always say, I can thank John McEnroe for why I got the job as an umpire, because when he came in and reached the semifinal in Wimbledon the first time, he the establishment was so surprised because he was questioning everything. When he was putting
Sure.
his arm in the side and say, "You cannot be serious," and he was questioning if the ball was in or out, and he was questioning the decision from the chair umpire, and there were all over the world when he played, when Jimmy played, when other players played, there were umpires in some countries who left the chair umpires who got so offended that they went down from the chair and left. So there were matches that finished. There was one match in Miami, in Key Biscayne actually, between Lendl and I think it's Stefanki, where the umpire also left the chair. And the players played without the umpire, and the speaker kept the score. The guys just played without umpire. So it took some time for officiating to get established, and that was because of John McEnroe. 1978 and 1980s, they started with when MIPTC started. They started, of course, with professional supervisors. Because as soon as the professional supervisors were there, they started hiring professional chair umpires. And Rich Kaufman was one of the first one from New York. Jerry Armstrong from England was one of the first ones also. So they started hiring professional chair umpires because they realized there was a need for professional chair umpires because they wanted the rules to be interpreted the same in London, in Tokyo, in Miami, or in
Sure.
Johannesburg.
Yeah. Now the characters, obviously, I mean, you go all the way back to a guy like Frank Kovacs, the clown prince of tennis. I think his cousin was Ernie Kovacs, the comedian.
Yeah,
Bobby Riggs, Ili Nastasi, Jimmy
yeah.
Connors. I mean, there were some real characters. I mean, remember there was a crazy night match between Nasty and Johnny
Oh, yeah.
Mack where the umpire defaulted Nastasi, and then the tournament director, it may have been Bill Talbot, I don't, who came in and finished the match because there was a
Yeah.
riot. And it was a great umpire too, unfortunately, but it was tough
Yeah,
situation. So
I think that was Frank Hammond.
Frank Hammond, a
Frank
great
Hammond
umpire.
he was the famous American
Yeah,
umpire who did all the big matches with Connors and McEnroe
yeah,
when they started. Frank Hammond was probably the first professional umpire that was not hired by anybody, but he was
right,
considered professional. But today there are 20 professional umpires. ATP has a
sure.
group of 8 to 10. WTA has a group, and then you have the ITF. So today the group has expanded a lot.
Well, I could talk about you being a chair umpire all day, and we've been going at this a while. After 7,000 matches, you said, let me step down. Nobody would have been, if you had said, hey, I'm riding off into the sunset, you would have been fine. But no, you then become a tournament referee. And one of my favorite Lars Graff moments as a tournament referee, Roger Federer serving, I think it's Indian Wells, to Stan Wawrinka.
Okay.
I think he's down love 30, and he hits a first serve that is wide. Wawrinka hits the ball back. It's not called out. Wawrinka hits the ball back, and Roger reflexively hits the hits the ball into the net, and the umpire will not let him challenge. And Roger just says, "I want to talk to Lars." I thought that was great. And in your diplomat, and you are a diplomat. Let's be honest. It's you call the chair. I think you call the 90 seconds of diplomacy to change over. You come out, and Roger, who doesn't usually get hot, is upset. And I think he actually, I think well, what am I saying? Can you take us through those few moments you're talking to Roger and the chair umpire? What am you? Please go ahead.
When you go out, when you had a situation like that, when you go out as a supervisor, it's very important that you go to the chair umpire first. You should ask the chair umpire what happened. please explain to me the situation. Even if you have been watching the situation on the sideline, it's not fair if you go to the player and start talking to Roger, because then the chair umpire think, why? Why is Lars talking to Roger? He should talk to me. So the rule is, or the deal is, go to the chair umpire, let him explain what happened to you, even if you have seen it, and then now after you get it, now you have the picture from the chair umpire. Now you talk to Roger, because Roger is the one who is complaining here. Wawrinka is not saying much. So then you talk to Roger and ask Roger, or explain to Roger what happened. And then, if necessary, you talk to the other player too. Like in this situation, if I would have played a let, then I would, of course, talk to Roger. Then I had to tell Stan, this happened and this was a mistake, and we have to replay the point because whatever, the call came and the call hindered, and the chair umpire didn't see that there was a call, whatever. So it's the 90 sec it should be faster than 90 seconds. The 90-second diplomacy is doing the changeover. But here, you should try to do it as fast as possible.
Sure.
Go to the chair umpire, talk to the chair umpire, then you talk to the player who's complaining, and if it affects the opponent, you talk to him too, and then you have to make a decision, and you have to leave. And of course, it's an advantage that the player know you. They know I was a chair umpire before. Now I'm a supervisor, so they know. Hopefully, he knows the rules. They think they know I know the rules, so I can, interpret it in the right way. And luckily, there I was even watching the match. But as a supervisor, when you watch a match, when it comes to a question of fact, you cannot change the chair umpire
Sure.
decision. When it comes to a question of rule, if there is a misunderstanding, or if the chair umpire makes a mistake with a ball change, or something happened, that clearly written in the rule book. If you forget the ball change, you have to wait to change the ball until the right person is serving again. If the chair umpire, for some reason, want to change and let the other guy serve, then you can say, sorry, this is not correct. In the rule, it's very clearly written that if you forget a ball change, you have to wait until the correct server is serving again. So that's a big difference as a supervisor. If it's a question of fact, chair umpire's decision stands. You still maybe have to confirm it, but if it's a question of rule, the supervisor can't change the decision.
What I loved about that was twofold. Number one, Roger's going, let me talk to Lars, like your best, like, let me talk to Lars. I love that. And then um, when there's an exchange between you and Roger, where you've made a decision that you can't touch that call and it's going to stand, and he goes, Lars, was he right? And what did you say? You said, I can't, it doesn't matter. I think
Doesn't
essentially is
matter.
what you said. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. It
So
doesn't matter.
I love that. And then, so
Yeah, because you cannot take the way. If the chair umpire was wrong, I
yeah,
cannot tell Roger live television,
yeah,
no, he was wrong.
sure.
You have to play the game, of course.
Of course. But I loved,
After the match, you can discuss it and watch the TV or whatever. But I mean, you have to protect the chair umpire also and the integrity of him. And
well,
that's why I say it doesn't
if,
matter.
well, having watched you over the years, if there is a voting for Swedish ambassador to the U.S., I am voting for you because you've handled some of these crises. You then go from being a tournament referee to an ATP executive position, right? Is that
Yeah,
accurate? In Ponte Vedra, Florida. And
yeah.
again, you could have hung it up after the chair. You could have hung it up after, but no. Now I'm going to be an ATP executive. What did you learn there, and what was interesting for you about that gig?
Well, then there I learned what happened behind the closed doors.
Okay,
How everything is working, how
sure,
ATP is financing the operations, so how the decision making is between the ATP board and then the tournament council, the player council. How the whole governance of the sport is handled. And I was dealing completely on a different level with different people, and then I was going to meetings. They send me to meetings with the tournament directors, which they have a couple of times a year, and then I go to learn how new rules are changed. If it's the players who want the rule change, it's not like the players say from today we want a rule change. That has to go through a process.
sure,
If the players want a rule change, then it has to go through the player council. then the tournament council has to see, because a rule change can impact the tournaments. I mean, if the players want to have 4 wild cards instead of 3 wild cards, because they think, it gives opportunities. Then you have to go to tournaments and discuss with them. Are you happy to have another wild card? And this is going to be the effect for you. You can wait longer, and you can maybe get another top player at the end of just before you're going to make the draw. And then if the tournament council and the player council are basically agreeing or not agreeing, then it goes to the board, and then the ATP board makes a decision. And this happens all the time. It can be anything now from electronic line calling. It can be to the prize money. It can be, rule changes.
Right.
It can be the calendar. There are so many things. So it's a very complex picture behind the scenes, how the sport is governed.
So if I'm writing the Lars Graff movie, the life story, we take it out. He becomes the greatest ATP executive ever, rides into the sunset. But no, it's not over. Now, all of a sudden, hey, why not become the tournament director of this huge China Open? It's a Masters 1000 for the WTA, an ATP 500 for the men. Lars, what are you doing? Why? How did this come about? I mean, it's extraordinary to me that you did that. Tell us about
I
that.
mean, I was working as a supervisor all over the world, and many times I was in China working as a supervisor, and then I was contacted in 2019 by the China Open. They had a committee looking for a new tournament director, and they contacted me because I've been working there as a supervisor for many years, and I was, as a supervisor, basically you're responsible for not only for the competition, but as a supervisor you're also responsible for grading the tournament to make sure that the
Sure.
food is good, transportation is good, internet, hotel, courts, balls, whatever. So they knew I've been there many years grading the tournament and working together with them. And they offered me the job to be a tournament director. And I got through some interviews and stuff like that. And I thought it was a big challenge because as a tournament director, you're like, you put everything together. You have
Sure.
officiating, you have the player services, then you have the sponsors, you have the audience, you have the spectators, you have, the media, everything. So I thought that was a big challenge. And I couldn't refuse the offer when I got it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a better guy. I mean, you've always, in my view, watched you. You're very player oriented. Um, and let's face it, it's all about the players. And I listened to another podcast. I mean, I've listened to Served with Andy Roddick, but nothing major with Sam Querrey, Jack Sock, Stevie Johnson, and John Isner. They get into some of the details about the tournaments, and the players see everything. They discuss the laundry in Rome. They discuss crustables at the Miami Open. So they see everything. And I'm just picturing you, Lars, and having spoken to James Blake and interviewed him about the tournament director job, it's really hands on. And I'm picturing you are just doing everything you can for the fan experience, but also to make the players happy. What are some of the things that Lars does? You're meeting players at the airport. You're making sure the food's good. Tell us some of like if I play that tournament, you give me a wild card, Lars, which I don't think you're going to do. But if you did, what can I expect?
If you're a seated player, you can expect me to be at the airport
Okay.
greeting you and
Right.
give you a little gift. I gave the mascot to all the players when I came. So when
Nice.
Sabalenka or Iga or Sinner or Alcaraz they came, I greeted them, welcome to Beijing, and I gave them a little mascot. But then when I'm on site, my job is to greet every player. I don't miss one opportunity. I go up to them and say, whoever I see, if it's a doubles player or if it's a singles player, for me it doesn't matter. I always go up and say, "Welcome to Beijing. Is there anything I can do for you? Please let me know." And I want the players to come to me. If internet is not working in Beijing, I want them to come to me and tell me. If the food is not good enough, please tell me. If there's not enough vegetables or if there's not enough meat, tell me. If the water is cold in the showers, please tell me. If the hotel is not treating you in the way you wanted to, or security, whatever, I'm a very active tournament director. I'm
Sure.
always out. I don't sit in my office and close the door and hide. I'm always out. I talk to the players, and I feel there is a big advantage that they know I was an umpire, I was a supervisor, and they come up to me. And I think many players feel comfortable to come up to me and say, Lars, come on, the transportation is not working well. This morning I had to wait for a car for 15 minutes, or other players, they call me and say, can I get an extra badge for my coach? Because I had two coaches this week. And of course, if I can help them, I do that. For me, the most important thing is the players.
Sure,
That's I mean, that's why I say sometimes, ATP, I'm in the tournament council and represent the tournaments. But
sure.
I say, guys, I'm also representing the players because the players are the most important thing. The tournaments, we are going to do everything we can. But if we don't have players supporting us, we will not have a good tournament. So
Right.
I'm very, very keen on having a good relationship with the players. And of course, it was a learning process for me on the women. On the men, everybody knew me.
Sure,
They called me first name.
sure.
And some players still think I'm umpiring. Some players still think I'm the supervisor.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, I was where was the last time? I was at the tournament a couple of weeks ago. And, yeah, and I was at the tournament one, and then Hurkacz comes out to my Lars. What do you think about the schedule tomorrow? I'm playing second. Why is this? I said, sorry, I don't have anything to do with the schedule here. We're in Madrid now. So sometimes the players, when they see me at another tournament, they think I'm the supervisor. But
That's great. I'm picturing you being you just having a good laugh over that one.
exactly.
Yeah,
But for the women's side, I had to learn, a lot. So
sure.
this morning I was in contact with Iga. I was in contact with what was it, Coco Golf,
I love it.
somebody.
Keep dropping names. I love it. This is helping the
Because
podcast.
we have a junior tournament in Beijing
Sure.
starting in a week, and I wanted them to give a message to the players, like a
Oh,
short video message. Like I contacted like four or five players, and Iga is unbelievable. Say, oh, no problem. I will do it as soon as I'm in Paris. I do it for you.
that is so
So
nice.
you have to build a relationship because ATP is also WTA is very strict. You can only have two appearances there. You can only have two messages. They have a very strict policy, which is good. You cannot ask the players to do 100 things.
Sure.
But sometimes, I use my own power. So like this year in Australian Open, we had ball kids from China there. We had six ball kids from China Open in Australian Open, and they wanted a picture with a player. So I went to Iga and she played a match, and then I said, "Can you do a picture with the ball kids?" She said, "No problem. I play." And she played Daniel. She played Collins, I think. That match lasted for 4 hours. It was an unbelievable match. She won the match. She went to the press, and then she said, "I'm ready now for the picture." She comes, and then she took a picture with the ball kids and a lot of other people. So I didn't even go for WTA. I didn't ask WTA that I need Iga because then they said, no, you cannot do that. That's too much. She's tired now. It's a long day. I sometimes go to the players myself and say, can you do that? And of course, when she comes to Beijing, I take care of her, or
I,
anybody else I take care of.
I
That's
love
important.
that. Nobody's taking Lars's credential away, but me, if I did that, I'm big trouble. Don't go directly to the players.
Exactly.
I
You
love
can't
that.
do that. You cannot
No,
do an interview
no,
without
no,
without
no, no.
proper permission. Yeah.
But I will tell you the hands-on approach, James Blake is everywhere at the Miami Open. The Barron
Yeah.
family, I covered a lot Miami Open Del Rey. Adam Barron, Ivan Barron, Mark Barron, there, the whole Barron family. David Barron comes in, the Barron family. Sharon Barron, is everywhere. I love the
Yeah.
Barron. But there is something to be said for being there. But I will nominate you for the diplomat of tennis. If they ever create a diplomat of tennis, people can learn a lot from you. But I will say I've never been to the China Open, but it does look very special because you've got the WTA 1000, the ATP 500. You seem to get all the players. Um, I see a lot of families there, and I think there's a golden week where a lot of the
Mm.
families are off, and you've got that beautiful it's a diamond uh,
Diamond court. Yeah.
court. So you're doing a lot of things right there, Lars. You must be so excited about. I know it's coming up. Very soon. It's like I had the dates in front of me. Was it September?
End of
Uh,
September, yeah, last week of September.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But we
tell
are very
us.
fortunate. We are very fortunate because tennis is doing very well in China. there's a big interest from China. And of course, Queen Wen, she won the Olympic gold medal last year in Paris. So every match she played was sold
Right.
out. And then, of course, there was another Chinese girl who did well, or quarterfinals, a lot of Chinese players. But the people, they loved Alcaraz, Sinner, they want the international stars too. So there's a China is very big in sport. They love sport. Table tennis is, of course, the number one sport. But tennis is getting up there,
Sure.
and they love the competition. And the good thing, the big difference between China Open and many other tournaments is that the average age of the spectators is around 40.
Wow.
And you can
Okay.
find out how much the average age is at the US Open. It's 20 years older, probably.
Yeah.
So in China Open, we want the father, the mother, and the kids to go and watch the tennis. We want them to have a cheap ticket so they don't have to pay more than $10, $15, whatever. We want them to be able to eat the cheap meal so they can enjoy themselves. We want to make it an event. We don't have these exclusive restaurants there. It's more like people can eat fast food or noodles or pasta or whatever, and we want them to enjoy it. And we see that a lot of the people who go to China Open, they have a dream that their kids one day should be ball kids and one day be tennis players or professional or college players. I mean, tennis is a big sport in China, and it is growing. More and more people play tennis, and the junior tennis is very healthy. There's a lot of junior tournaments all over.
Well, I love that philosophy, though. A cheaper ticket, less expensive food, you get the families. And I was going to ask you, but I had the chance to interview Zhang Qinwen and found her to be unbelievably nice and
Yeah.
engaging, and she comes across a little differently, which is when she's doing her job. But
Yeah.
man, she was so friendly and told me how much she loved Miami. Um, I don't know if it's possible for people to understand how big a star she must be in China. I recall like she flew home right after. Can you kind of help us in America here understand how big a star she is right now?
I mean, after the Olympics, she flew home, and the big corporations, they were lining up to sign the sponsorship deal with
Right.
her. And Nike normally don't allow patches on the clothing, but
Sure.
she has patches because she's so big, and Nike in China, of course, they're very happy to have her because that's a huge market for them. But companies want to be associated with her. It's like it's more to say no than to say yes, because it doesn't matter if it's cosmetics or if it's a car company or
Sure.
beauty company. They wouldn't be associated with her. And after she came home from the Olympics, she had to do interviews and television, magazines, and newspaper coverage. So it was huge. It was absolutely huge for her. And she came to Beijing almost 3 weeks before the tournament. As soon as she finished the US Open, she came to Beijing and she was practicing with her coach, Pere Riba. They were practicing at the Diamond Court every day for a couple of hours.
Amazing.
Practiced very hard, and that was the best place for her to be, because on the Diamond Court, there was no one coming in there. It was only her and her coach and her physio, whatever. So inside the National Tennis Center, she was by herself, and there was a gym and everything, so she could be there. So she was there for 3 weeks, and she reached the semifinal, and she every game or every match she played, it was sold out. Her capacity is around 14,000, and all tickets were sold for all her matches.
Yeah, it,
People
it,
love to watch her playing.
it's pretty amazing. And I don't want you to feel like you're in a 7 hour chair umpiring situation here, Lars. So I'm going to try to
No problem.
jump through just a couple of things here. The state of American tennis. How would you rate tennis on American tennis right now, men's on the men's side? Well, what are your
I think the
thoughts?
men's side is in a very healthy status.
Right.
There's a lot of American players. I
Sure.
mean, I should have done my homework before this, but
No, no, you're fine.
I think for sure there are more than 10 American players in the
Sure.
top right now, and they are so good and they're so even. So, I mean, Taylor Fritz is the highest ranked, but Brian Shelton can win a Grand Slam. Tommy Paul can win a Grand Slam. TFO can win a Grand Slam. So I think the American tennis is in a very good shape. It's just that you're missing that the top player who wins a
Sure.
big tournament. But I mean,
Yeah.
last year Taylor was in the final in US Open. He was in the final in ATP finals in Turin. And I think it's just a question of time before an American wins a Grand Slam again. I
Sure.
don't think we have to wait another 20 years. I mean, since Andy Roddick won. So I think it's coming soon. And I think tennis is still a very big sport in America.
Yes.
It's a big sport. I mean, there are tennis courts everywhere. Even if other sports are gaining market shares, still tennis is a very big sport. And college tennis has never been more competitive than it is today. So, I mean, you see now players coming out of college and they are very good. They can go up to the top 100 very, very quickly because they
Sure.
have so much competition. So I think I mean American men's tennis is in very healthy status, and I think that it's a question of time before you see a real big winner.
I would agree. I know you mentioned that Brian Shelton might win a slam. I think you meant Ben Shelton because if Brian wins
Oh,
a
yeah, Papa.
slam,
Oh, sorry,
right, I will
Brian.
be.
No, I
I
think
will.
Brian might win a
I,
seniors
all
Grand
right. I
Slam.
will bet you anything that
Ben,
Brian Shelton does
sorry.
not win a slam. Uh, but
Ben Shelton, yeah, for
no,
sure.
but that's great stuff. But I think the state of women's tennis in America is also doing well. Our cover story, Madison Keys, for her win. This is our March April issue of Florida Tennis. Her win has got to be for us here, certainly in America, the tennis story of the year. Perseverance, nice person. Your take
Yeah.
on that, Lars, on American
But she's
tennis and
still
Matt
she's
Keys.
still on the number three.
Yeah, she's
Both
in.
the Coco and Pegola is higher ranked.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe Pegola or Coco wins another Grand
sure,
Slam.
sure.
The girls are over good. Emma Navarro. I mean, God, the
Yeah,
women's tennis is very strong, extremely strong.
we are doing great, and we touched on this technology. I'm jumping around a little. Technology. It seems like if you get to the point where you want the calls to be 100% perfect, you start to lose the human element. And I don't know where that becomes a diminishing returns. No pun intended. So your take on how important I guess it is to have human beings, involved in calls and as a chair umpires and everything versus
It's
technology.
very important.
Yeah,
I think if we take away the chair umpire and put the robot up there, then I think tennis will lose market shares to other sports very, very quickly because people are paying a lot of money to go watch matches at the US
sure.
Open or in Miami or Indian Wells, and people want an event and they want personalities there. I mean, you know, players need to have personalities, and I think chair umpires need to have personalities. And I think the human element is very, very important. If we take away the human element, I think tennis will suffer. I mean, there are already people saying that the chair umpire should not sit in a chair. The chair umpire should be standing beside the court. And I say, how can you be standing beside the court? At least in the chair, you have a little better view of what's happening. If you stand beside the court, you're not going to see what's happening all the way down in the right corner or right far corner or left far corner. So I think the human element is very important for any sport.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to be watching a little bit later today the Florida Panthers, Toronto Maple Leafs, and boy, you talk about a sport that needs officiating. You
Yeah.
know, it can get a little chippy out there on the ice out there. So I can't imagine just like some voice from above going, 2 minutes high sticking. But I digress. I'm going to circle back, kind of Lars, to the beginning, which is Racket X. Okay, meeting you at Racket X, and one of the things that struck me is again, and this is an event that has all the racket sports under one roof. You just seemed so engaged, so interested, and it struck me. And are you as excited now about tennis as you were when you were a ball boy for Bjorn Borg in Sweden? I mean, do you still have that same love and passion for the game of tennis?
I think I'm more excited now than I was when I started because when I started, I didn't know as much as I do today. So now I'm very excited to see what's happening in the tennis. And I mean, yesterday was a fantastic day when when Paulini won in Rome. She won singles yesterday. Now she won doubles also. And I think today was a great day with Alcaraz and Sinner in the final. So I'm more excited now. I think the tennis stars are stronger than ever. Tennis as a world sport, as an international sport, is extremely strong. I
Yeah,
think it's just a question, that to keep that level and keep the personalities and make sure that tennis is not playing too much, because sometimes the players are having so many commitments, and
sure.
they play so many tournaments, and then the exhibitions come in and everything. So I think it's important to preserve the biggest players and the best players to the big tournaments, because it's such. I mean, you watch tennis on television, or you go live. I mean, you go live at US Open. What are you talking about? Over 20,000
Wow.
spectators,
Yeah.
and you can watch there. Can you imagine you play other sports down there? You couldn't even see the ball. You only see the players moving the arms or the shadows. So tennis still is a great sport for television, and it's a great sport, live sport also. I'm not
Uh,
saying that other racket sports are not good live sports, but it's more difficult with other racket sports to have them as a live sport in a big arena.
I've heard you talk about this before. We'll kind of wrap things up, Lars. I know you're a traditionalist as I am in a lot of ways, but people consume things differently. The younger people, there are, uh, a lot of people still want their Florida Tennis Magazine, but we're online with Facebook and Instagram, and the younger people are consuming things a little differently. You have these long matches, they're epic matches, but are you in favor of some changes that might make the sport a little bit quicker, or I'm just curious about your thoughts on how to bring the younger people along to what we consider to be the greatest sport on the planet.
I think we have to look into different scoring formats for sure,
Okay,
because I think that you and I can watch a 5.5 hour match,
sure,
but it's very, very difficult to get the younger people to watch tennis that long. So, I mean, Grand Slams is tradition, and the tradition is great. Maybe the Grand Slams should have best of five sets from the quarterfinals instead of having it from the
sure,
first round. I mean, the Grand Slams is an institution himself, so they always survive. But ATP took away the five-set matches or five-set finals in the Masters many years ago, and I think we cannot have matches that last 4 or 5 hours. I mean, there were some matches in Rome that went up to 4 hours. I mean, some singles matches, and I think it's the problem with tennis is also that we have to start the matches at time. If it's 2 o'clock final, it has to start 2 o'clock. Because if people come on TV at 2 o'clock and the match hasn't started, they go to Formula One, or they go to soccer, or they go somewhere else. And then they maybe never come back to the tennis. So I think tennis loses a lot of viewers on television because we don't start on time. I mean, players come on court and then they warm up 4 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever now, and then they go for a toilet break. That's not good. I mean, so
sure,
we need to make sure that when tennis starts at 2 o'clock, it starts at 2 o'clock. And I think
sure.
maybe we have to look into different scoring formats. I mean, I don't know. Either maybe first to four is very attractive because then the games are much more valuable immediately. Or final set, maybe match tiebreak or something to shorten it down. Because if the matches are too long, you and I love it, but I'm sure we lose a lot of young people that don't want to stay that long.
Well, certainly a debate for another show, but I want to wish you all the luck in the world, first of all, at the China Open. I really do hope to see that event in person someday and share a beverage of some type with you there if you can spare some time when you're running around. It runs from September 24th to October 5th. How can people get great tickets for the event and enjoy the Diamond Court? What's the best way for them to get tickets for
Just
that
go in
event?
on our website,
Okay.
an open website, and then they can buy the tickets there. We have not started selling the tickets yet.
Okay.
Start selling the tickets in July, so we're still waiting.
And is that ticket going to cover both the men's and the women's? Will they be able to see men's and women matches in the
Yeah,
same? Great.
That's a
Okay.
big advantage with a
Sure.
combined event. Like on the diamond court, basically every other day we have three men's matches
Great.
and two women's matches. And then we have three women's matches and two men's matches. So we alter on the diamond court. And on the outside courts, there are men's and women's matches back and forth. And the women's tournament is a 96 draw. So there's a lot of matches going on there.
Lars, I'm going to hit you with one last question. And this is just a quick question about looking back on your chair umpire, um, a particular moment that will always be etched in your mind. You know, a happy moment, hopefully, that will always be etched in your mind as a chair umpire.
That must
But
be the Wimbledon final 2009. Federer
okay,
and Roddick. I mean, that was
all right.
the highlight of my
This
umpire.
ticket,
16-14 in the fifth set, and Roddick loses the serve once. It's an amazing match, and also Wimbledon is Wimbledon. You know, I always say to people, you go in any other tournament in the world, and there is noise, there is sound. You go in Wimbledon on center court, match is started. You say first set, Roger Federer to serve, ready, play, and it's quiet like in a church. You can hear yourself breathing. You sit up in an umpire chair. It's so quiet. So, I mean,
right?
I know people think we should let people coming in more often. You know, you don't have to wait to a changeover and all that. But you know, Wimbledon is a special. The atmosphere
Yeah,
there, the respect, the crowd. It's just fantastic.
yeah. I've been lucky enough to see Roger play at Wimbledon. I've been lucky enough. I actually saw Rafa's last match in person against Zverev. By the way, which I think he beats anybody else that day, but that's a whole other story about not seating him. That don't get me started there. But um, Lars, I cannot thank you enough for taking what has been a great deal of time. It has been one of my all-time favorite shows. I feel like we just scratched the surface, so I'm going to ask you hopefully someday, maybe you'll come back. Maybe you could do your China Open preview or a China Open wrap up. So thank you so very much for taking the time on behalf of Florida Tennis, on behalf of the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. I want to wish you a great night tonight, and thank you so very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and it's good for me to speak to you because I also remember things that I almost have forgotten. You know, just by you saying one little word, then I remember. Oh yeah, that happened. That's correct. So it was a pleasure talking to you, and good luck in the future with your podcast in Florida tennis.
Thank you so much, Lars. Have a great night.